was going by, and he pulled in and parked right in front of us at that time. And he walked back, and I was real happy because I thought, oh, we'll get another witness here. And it was pretty nice. And so he walked back, and I was just ready to take this fantastic picture. And I thought, oh, this will be a beautiful picture because I could see the windows and it over the freeway, and it just proved that UFOs exist.
Welcome back to Breaking the Silence in Conversation with, and today I'm talking with an old friend, Kim Trotman, who's well known for her hypnotherapy work, and she's an experiencer, and she has done past life regressions, and she's going to talk about her work and her experiences with us today. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, good to see you.
It took a machete and a guide to get you in here, but you're here, and you're
I
looking good.
you you forced me to do all my computer work before I talked to you. I've gotten so far away from my engineering computer days that I just avoid it now.
Well, you figured it out, and that's good.
Yeah,
So, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm actually quite well, quite well. For
Good.
yeah, I mean, I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but I still feel like one.
Yeah, I
Turned
know.
73 in March, and it's hard to believe, but there it is. We keep moving on.
Yeah, life
Um,
too short.
yeah, it is. Let's begin by, if you will, sharing your experience with the audience, because our audience is mostly experiencers. Our group of, we call it a family. I mean, they're friends, they're family, they're part of a community that they really created themselves as a result of our show, Breaking the Silence, because we gave them a place that they feel safe in speaking about this, whether off camera or on camera or behind a letter. Um, so you're talking to people that well understand and are very curious about your experiences that you have personally yourself.
Okay. Yeah, had experiences when I was younger, but I my grandmother was psychic, astral projected, my mom, saw ghosts and the whole family basically. But what happened when I was a baby was, I was probably 2 or under in my crib, and my mom had left my socks on accidentally. I don't know why this was such a big deal, but so I was really being responsible about what to do with them. She just said, just put them next to you, and left. And then I'm laying in my crib and watching them, making sure nothing happened. Just to give you some idea of my personality.
Well, we know what aliens do with socks.
Yeah. But I saw some movement up towards the head of the crib, and I looked, and this little wooden man in my screen memory was kind of walking up, and I just watched him. They grabbed the end of one of the socks, twirled so it was over his shoulder, and then started heading back. And I just grabbed at it and I was thinking it was like a telepathic conversation of what are you doing, and he was taking it and taking it home. And so I'm just, like in a panic because it was my big responsibility. So when I grabbed at it, to me, it looked like he jump, but I just saw him and the sock go flipping away, almost like between the mattress and the headboard. So I got up on the rail and started just yelling about this horrible theft, like bloody murder. And both my parents came in the room, and I just looked at my dad, and he looked really confused. And my mom, she just had this kind of weird smirk on her face. And I'd never seen that. I didn't know what the problem was, but I had to, get him in gear. And they got me out of the crib, and I was showing him where he went in my mind. And it just, my mom was just driving me crazy because she was kind of faking putting her hand between, and I had them take the whole mattress out, and and I'm sure they were just like, what on earth? But they couldn't find the sock. But it kind of became the family joke, that Kim made her sock or whatever. And so it was very annoying. But it was years later, and after being in Yvonne's group, I was thinking about why take a sock? And I got this kind of download or something that it was so I knew it happened. And a lot of times I've noticed when, luckily, like when I've seen craft, I've had people with me most of the time that were also had their own experiences. And so I was really fortunate that way. But I also didn't place that experience as possible UFO, or alien. And
You didn't connect the two of them together.
it took me a long time. I actually did a regression with Yvonne early on when I first started going to her group. I think it was like in 2008 or something. But I saw whatever this little wooden man was. It was small. It wasn't a wooden man. It was just a screen memory of what I guess maybe my mom's artist figure or something. But I am.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, it just looked kind of more like a toy or something in my conscious mind, but it looked a little. I couldn't see the whole thing honestly, but it looked kind of a little like an iguana or something. Like I could just see parts of it. I couldn't really see
Right.
the whole thing. And I just got a glimpse of that, and then I also had an impression of beings outside the window, like 3, and then I had a memory or a flash of almost like they took my eye out and put something in. And I was kind of shocked, honestly, and Yvonne told me that wasn't uncommon.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not uncommon.
Yeah, and I thought, well, I'm glad I didn't remember that part. But my sister and I had bloody noses a lot, as kids, and I there was probably a lot more than I would have guessed. But and then, like years later, I found out also that my mom kept telling me he'd been hit by lightning, and I'm like, what?
Wow.
And he grew up in Washington at the foot of Mount St. Helens, and his mom, my grandmother, that was psychic, astral projected, and all of that. Um, she knew the guy Fred Beck that was attacked by Bigfoot in the 30s and had
Hmm.
seances. And, I think also thought all this was pretty paranormal because it was like she grew up in the Oddfellows home because she was orphaned by tuberculosis when she was a kid. And her and her brother grew up there. And they were kind of spiritualist background, um, like an offshoot of Freemasonry. And she also, when she was born, weighed 1.5 pounds, and they put her in a cigar box behind the stove in the kitchen, the wood burning stove, and somehow she survived. And I think that's part of the reason she was still kind of so connected to the other side. But my dad, grew up and he had some weird experiences too. But the lightning thing was his riding his bike on a dirt road, and he saw a big flash of light. It was daytime, and he came to when it was dark next to his bike.
Wow.
And when I heard it later through the lens of what I knew at that point, all of a sudden it was like he was abducted. And then it turns out, like my uncle, my uncle Bud, the next older one, he had joked around. He was a joker, but he drove the truck long distance, and he would talk periodically about seeing little green men in the desert or haha. And their house was haunted. Our house was haunted. And, there is a lot of paranormal, as you know, that comes along with it. But I just got it through that lens at first. And even though, like, where I grew up in Claremont, when I was 16, driving down Indian Hill Boulevard, actually, I was heading north towards our house. I had that experience where I was with a girlfriend. I was fairly new to driving, but I heard a hum, and it was just mild, but the car was like a duct taped together, Rambler that my dad put together for me and my sister.
Those
That,
are worth a lot of money now.
yeah, well, it was hanging in there. I think he bought it
Yeah.
at a dump or something, to give us something to drive. And I was looking around trying to figure out like what was this noise. And the windshields are more straight up and down, they're
Mhm.
not so curved like now, but and I looked up and the trees over Indian Hill hang over. I've noticed they've cut some of them down now and stuff, but it was like one of those tree lined roads, and you could see through the canopies, but I look up and there's the black triangle. And it wasn't big. I'd say like 30 feet or something, an exact equilateral triangle. And
Mhm.
it had lights on the points and some dome thing in the middle. And it was just going along just as slow as we were. And, my brain is not thinking UFOs. I didn't know what it was. I mean, I was just looking at it, trying to process, what I'm seeing. And my girlfriend and I, we decided we'll try to see where it goes. And then eventually, before we got to Foothill Boulevard, it kind of curved off towards the colleges. And, there's a lot of trees, and we couldn't find it after that. So we just went home and told my parents, and, they didn't seem, I was really lucky. I grew up where, stuff like that wasn't abnormal, like weird things happened and everybody could talk about it. So I was very lucky, but we decided I'd call the police, and my girlfriend, and we called, and I just got long pauses and, okie
Sure.
dokie. And then later, years later, I found out Barbara Lamb, the, other well-known hypnotherapist, had
Sure.
lived.
We've had her on the show just
Yeah.
recently.
Oh, okay. I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear she's
Well,
doing
I
well.
know Barbara. Yeah, she is doing well. She was at the MUFON symposium too just recently. So she
Wow,
is
that's
doing very well.
good for
Still
her.
working.
Yeah, but lived miles apart the whole time, and I didn't know that. And she lived closer to the colleges, and I was up kind of above Foothill, by above the high school. And what kind of sucked me into down the rabbit hole was I I had left engineering. I was tired of it, and I couldn't have even planned it how it worked, but I accidentally got a job reading cards, and I had learned, the year before from a girlfriend, and I'd always been curious, and I'd had that experience. I think I was reading people my whole life. I just didn't know what it was. And they would act kind of like, I didn't tell you that. And I'd be thinking, are you sure? I felt like, it'd be like I felt like I knew it somehow. And so I was doing that and still doing engineering, fire protection with the company I'd helped start. And working with my girlfriend, Wendy, who I trained to do the drawings. And it's for like an international insurance company.
Hmm.
So they would be like metric English from all over the world. But anyways, so I was just going in like 5 hours a week. My husband about had a heart attack because he's a chemical engineer and very practical, and he kind of had to come along kicking and screaming with the whole thing. But I trained with Dr. Brian Weiss, who wrote Many Lives, Many Masters, to do past life regression. And then I had taken the training first, then that was, like specifically for past life regression. And so I was practicing on all my friends as guinea pigs, and um, I hypnotized my friend Wendy, and I've known her since second grade. She actually was in the shots line before me and fainted. She told him she was going to too, and and already I'm nervous, and then she does faint, and they gave her the shot anyways, drug her off, and then I was next. So, it was kind of like, whoa. But I found her on the playground, and then we just were friends ever since. And so we grew up, went to high school together, and I actually got her into computer graphics, and she was
Oh
kind of
boy.
finding her way and worked at Hughes Aircraft as an engineer. And then my dad also worked at Hughes. He was a nuclear physicist.
Wow.
And um,
That's typical too.
yeah, it is typical. He had high clearances and all of that. She did. I actually was interviewed for her clearances and for another friend's. But so we were doing the past life regression, and she kept trying to wake up. And she said she heard her mother calling her, and weird things. I hadn't run into it. And I kept telling her, okay, close your eyes. And then she told me she got stuck in this park area, and it looked like the arboretum next to the high school we grew up with. And I, thought, well, that's weird. So finally I just said, okay, well, let's look around the park. And so she told me she couldn't move. She was paralyzed, stuck to this stone bench, and it looked more green than the arboretum actually does. And she said there was just no sound, no animals, no water, no wind, just quiet. And but there were some people. And then she said they were around her, and only men. And then I said, well, what do they look like? And in the meantime, she tried to wake up 2 more times. And she said she was getting scared, I could tell. And she said, kind of whispered over to me, they're weirdly thin, like Auschwitz thin.
Mm.
And she's really starting to panic. And I said, just float up, float up. And then she said, I don't think they're people. And I asked her what she thought they were, and I knew what she was going to say, but she said aliens. And and then her eyes popped open, and we were both kind of like, huh. And
Yeah.
I grew up with her, and I'd had figures in my room, and I couldn't sleep. And you know, I mean, people thought I was narcoleptic because I'd stay up as long as I could before I'd go to sleep because of the stuff going on there.
I
And
used to. I used to. All through the 90s, I'd stay up till I saw the sun coming up, and then I'd rush in to go to bed because I kind of felt, I think, subconsciously or maybe even consciously that I couldn't be. I would actually get to sleep
yeah,
because it was
yeah,
daytime, which was
yeah,
silly.
it's felt safer.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
Yeah, it just seemed like everything kind of lit up at night, and stuff happened. And I honestly thought it was ghosts. And I think a lot of it was, but I also think it was more.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's related. I mean, it's
yeah,
related. It
yeah,
is.
you're seeing figures in your room, it's a little hard to distinguish sometimes. But
Spirit is spirit, whether it's actually physical or physical and non-physical both, which we are both ourselves. You know that.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so that kind of, I saw Yvonne Smith on a show, and I contacted her and realized that she was fairly local. So I bought her book and her CD with her interviewing with Bud Hopkins, her mentor, and talked to her. And I was thinking, well, maybe she can hypnotize Wendy, and then I'll just observe her techniques. And then that never really happened. I just started going to MUFON, took Wendy. We saw Yvonne speak with some other abductees, and I could always see auras, as a kid. And I had kind of, I don't know, I think between life, as I got like high school age, started watching horror movies, and a lot of that faded
That's
back.
also typical.
Yeah, I was more like, oh God, what's
Yeah.
happening? And it started to come back. I was working as a waitress when I was 15 at a friend's dad's donut shop, and the guy had the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and
Oh, wow.
he was talking about auras, and I'm like, "What is that?" And he described it, and I'm like, "Oh, I see that." And at the time, it was just kind of coming back. And my sister told me as a kid, I would talk about people in colors. And I've since kind of wondered if it's not synesthesia or something. I don't really know, but whatever it is, I could always, see it. And so when I got around people that, were kind of off, or I could tell if they were very analytical, if they were very, like empathic or psychic by the colors. And so, but yeah, so a lot of that started kind of coming back, and I started trying to understand it more at that point. I'm sure I had some place I was going with this, but now I don't remember.
Well, you've done a really great job of sharing with us your story about how this all evolved for you, and it's fascinating. I have a couple of questions, and of course, I kind of write them down, which is why you see me looking down a lot. But um, going back to the stick man, I don't know if you remember the stick man that I saw in my kitchen. This is when I was going to Avon, but I woke up in the morning, and I'll make it short 'cause we're talking about you. People complain about that sometimes, but I just want you to know the similarity. I go out to the kitchen, and there's a butcher block sitting in front of the refrigerator door, a huge one that somehow my wife had managed to move there. Why, I don't know. And its legs started to move. And then I
Ugh.
saw this very tan, almost wooden colored looking, and it was a gray, definitely really tiny and real thin and black eyes. That
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing. But the real question was, you were talking about how you felt that you were communicating with it telepathically, and I fully understand that, and I know you do too, especially now
yeah,
with our experience. But do you think that when we're kids, we don't we are more telepathic, that we don't realize we don't have telepathy until we're told we don't by the authorities and our
yeah.
culture and our parents? Oh, no, no, you just got a big imagination. But I sense that when we're children, we don't know that we're not telepathic, that it's natural to us.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of abilities, like the fact that I wasn't bothered there was some strange little man in my crib. The fact that he took my sock was a real problem.
And only one sock.
Yeah, only one, and the
That's
theft.
the deal.
Yeah.
It's
And
always one.
yeah, when you think about how weird that is, like why wouldn't I be like, but when you're a kid, you're just open to everything. And I think a lot of people, I remember things from when I was a baby and a kid. I remember getting my own diapers. Like I remember the cat and the neighbors and all of it. And so it's really funny because I know a lot of people they don't. And I don't have memories of being traumatized by aliens or anything. I have memories of being terrified of whatever's happening in my room, but I also was pretty, sleep deprived. So they could have flown me all over the universe and I probably slept through it.
They may they may have. Did you I I when I was very young, I would say to my mom, we'd be in a restaurant and I could hear what people were saying, but
Yeah.
it was more than that. And she got very. 'Cause my mom kept secrets from me all my life. Not
Mhm.
towards the end, she admitted to me that she had these experiences herself. But
Wow.
the thing was, is I thought I was hearing people speaking at the table. I hear what they're saying, and she told me that then you have our hearing, and you have to be selective, and you can't be eavesdropping on people. What I later found out was, and I'm pretty sure of this, is I was actually hearing their thoughts
Yeah.
because I didn't know better. Did you ever experience that? And do you still experience that?
Yeah, it's funny because doing readings, I'll I'm better now at understanding where information's coming from, but yeah, I it's not as vivid as it was when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Most of my clients, I kind of attract people that vibrate from like here up, and so their auras typically are green, lavender, blues, or tend to be more analytical people, but sometimes I'll see a layer of blue and I'll know that they do analytical work of some sort, or they've got a balance to them. It's kind of funny when I see people with lavender and blue. A lot of times they are abductees or they're psychologists.
Huh.
So don't ask me why. A lot of blues are engineers and doctors, people that are way far over in the analytical end. And that's also throat chakra colors. So if I see
Right.
balls of blue or um, kind of the mid shades of blue, a lot of times they're a communicator and they got something to write, like the balls. And I've kind of just figured it out over time. If they're talking and yellow starts to bleed in, they're insecure about it, they're not sure about it. And that's like your solar plexus color. And the lavender, just straight lavender, is either they started off in the healing empath realm and then they've kind of moved up into the intuitive area. And occasionally I'll see, someone that's got an orange aura, or but a lot of times there's kind of blends, and as they talk they can shift and change a bit. And I don't see it all the time. People are like, do you run around and everybody's glowing? And it's not really. It's more as I'm kind of leaned back and connecting into their energy. But also,
You're focused.
yeah, a lot of the
Yeah.
information about the person is there. And then occasionally, I'll get they used to wake me up at night. Like I'd wake up and there'd be someone in my room. And I just finally got tired of that and said, go to the office, or talk to me in the day. Like, I can't do this all night. And,
Yeah.
but I, like, I've really come to realize we're not that tethered to our bodies. Like,
Oh no.
people think we're this and we're
No, no, no,
really
no.
not. Yeah. So it's funny. One lady came in and I could see a man standing next to her, and I just finally asked her if her husband had passed, because I thought it's either him or somebody she knows. But he felt like her husband, and she kind of looked really shocked and she said, "No, he has Alzheimer's." And I realized he was going around with her, even though his body was back, that there's a chunk of him going around with her. And then I've had people see me places, when I wasn't there, but I was sending healing. And one was a girl I had worked with at a 12-step store when I first was doing readings. And she had gotten rearrested and she saw me in her jail cell twice. She woke up at night and I was there.
Wow.
And I had been doing healings. And I even recently, I've had a number of experiences with, I guess, doppelgangers. I don't know, but my friend Wendy and I both saw them when we were up in at the UFO Fest in McMinnville, and
Hmm.
that's where my mom grew up, next to that Sheridan, and we still have the farm up there. But my grandfather, my mom's dad, he knew the Trents that took those photos that's based on. The McMinnimums kind of took those photos from the 50s and Look magazine and made that whole festival out of it.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not up on that.
Yeah, it's small, but it's fun. They get good guests, and they have a parade that's kind of like a alien doodah parade. And
Right. And it's all based on a case that happened there
yeah,
where the
those Trent photos. And they lived in McMinnville, and we're just like 12 miles from the farm. And I also recently, my mom told me that I knew I had the nuclear connection on my dad's side, but I didn't realize they had moved to Washington first from back east, St. Louis, that area, because for my grandfather to work on the Manhattan Project. I had no idea. He was a metallurgist, and I guess that's in Hanford. That's where they were refining the plutonium. So I thought, oh, okay, see, I have it on both sides, and I didn't even know that.
Very
I al-
typical.
yeah, I also found out that he was studying Rosicrucians. He was a 32nd Order Freemason. You know, I just thought he was a farmer, and had the farm. So I that was weird, and but up there in McMinnville, um, we were staying at my sister's house, and um, they're in Vancouver, Washington, and she had we'd had some, hors d'oeuvres, and she shot off to pick up her husband at physical therapy, and then after a while, Wendy and I are talking, and we hear the door make a noise, like it's shut. And I look up and I see her standing kind of across the kitchen in the door frame. And she starts to take her coat off. And I said, "Oh, Sue." And Wendy said, "Oh," and looked over, and she just kind of kept going back towards their bedroom. And then we're talking, and then Wendy goes, "Something's wrong." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Your sister didn't come back, and where's her husband?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're right." And so we walked through the kitchen towards where we saw her. And Wendy said, "Let's check the garage." And we opened the door, and the car wasn't there, and the door was down. And so I called my sister, and she goes, "No, we're still 5 minutes away. We're picking up the mail." And it wasn't her. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was really weird. We were a little shook. And then the next 2 days later, my brother met us, and we were on a break from the festival. And my sister had gone to listen to a speaker that we weren't really interested in, and we were like going to the shops, and so we're sitting outside of McMinnville's, and there's people all over, and we look up, and there's my sister, and it was about the time she was supposed to come back, and so we're waving, and she goes into the tent and doesn't come back out for a few minutes, and she does, we're waving again, then she just kind of disappeared. And so I told my brother, I said, "She knew to come here, right?" And he said, "Yeah, I texted her." And right then I look at my phone, and she sent a text saying the thing went long, and she was still there. And
Wow.
yeah, and so it's funny, but that's been happening, and I'm not sure what to make of it. I know a lot of times, like when something's going on, it's sort of, I've heard the description, it's in a liminal space, which is sort of on the outer edges of something. And I think that's why a lot of times it's so difficult to make sense of. Like, what is that? Like, is that a piece of her that came back, or was worried about us and reconnecting, or when I was doing healings, I kind of get it. Maybe I was just falling asleep and going on over, but it's strange. And I had that experience with my husband when he was in the hospital, and I felt fear when I was driving by and I was meeting clients. And then I got a call that he was having a TIA, which is like a small stroke, and that passes, but I'd never heard of it. So I just had my clients close the office. They were also Cero members. And I hauled over to the hospital, which was just right across the way. And he was gone, and I got scared, like, uh-oh, they're mopping the floor. But he came back, and he told me that he saw me there. Like, he saw a guy he used to work with, a nurse that had the same name, came in, and he said he woke up from a dream, or he's having a dream that he couldn't talk, and then he woke up, and then he realized he still couldn't talk or move. And um, he told, he was trying to tell them he was having a stroke. And then I came in, And he said, I said, "Oh, I'm going to go get help." And we all left. And he'd accidentally bumped the nurse call thing. And she asked him if he needed help. And he said, "No, my wife is getting help." And then right then the doctor poked his head in, and he never came in the middle of the day. And he's usually 6 in the morning or really late at night. And he kind of looked out the door and took off for a minute, did get help, came back, and he said, "Your wife isn't here." And
Uh,
so I think a part of me or a guide or something went and got help.
we have a a friend in our group um, that claims he doesn't really have experiences. He's just very, very interested in this phenomenon. Loves being around people. He's very smart. He does a lot of research about it, and but yet on the same cuff, he's told me in the group at least two stories where he was at work and he just was really tired and he laid his head down for a 10-minute cat nap. And then he goes home and his wife tells him, "You were here earlier." "What?" "Yes, you came in, you poked your head in. I figured you'd come home early, but then when I went to look for you, you were gone."
Yeah.
And then another time, same thing. He took a cat nap. She had been in a car accident, and he appeared next to her and and helped her get out of the car, and
Yeah.
then was gone. So, and I know, Kim, that you've heard hundreds of stories like this.
Yeah. It's and it's really weird, but like when I was taking I figured I better figure this out, so I took some healing classes and Reiki and all, different theta healing, all sorts of things. And honestly, it's all kind of the same thing. Basically,
All
people
related.
layer a lot on it. And it's really the same with anything. It's kind of basic stuff that runs through everything. But yeah, and I kind of, I mean, the people are really nice and all of that, but when I got around the people that had experiences, they just felt familiar. They felt more like me. And there's kind of a weird like I have a healthy analytical side, after doing all the engineering and things.
Of course.
But I have this part, like if I, like in the haunted office I worked in, if we heard a noise, I'd go after it. I want to see what it
Yeah.
is. And most of the time, you could tell it was a male. And, you know, sometimes I'd smell, like when I was on my own, sometimes I'd smell lilies or lemons, or I think it was the way of saying I'm here, but it didn't feel threatening. But I'd want to know, and when I was around a lot of the more metaphysical, strictly people, they, it was kind of like, kumbaya fairies, just very, um, don't, I don't know, it seems sort of like all up out of body a little bit. And people that are more interested in this, excuse me, there's a lot of engineers and doctors, lawyers, people that have that healthy analytical mind. They do want to understand it technically, but I think you also have to be of the mind that you can't toss things out because there's no known answer. And honestly, there may never be,
Yeah.
to everything.
And they're all uh, they're all materialism based. However,
Yeah.
for all their studies or research and their science, which I'm very much a fan of, none of them are able to define what the very thing they are is consciousness and spirit. They can't do it,
Yeah.
and they have been able to. And we're not going to be able to explain everything, but consciousness rules. There would be no reality that we know without it.
It's
And
true.
really, where science has to move is into the understanding of consciousness.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you some questions, if I may.
Yeah.
Um, you were talking about the people, and you can read their auras and what the different colors indicate. I don't think I'm able to do that, but I do have a really good empathic sense to what I'm dealing with,
Yeah.
what they're about. Like it's almost intuitive and psychic at the same time.
Hmm.
Um, and so, in you're working with people. There are people who know that they are having these experiences, close encounters, and then there are people who aren't sure, and then there are people who really haven't thought about it one way or the other. Are you aware that there is a program that's been going on for a very, very long time, um, that involves human beings living in their lives totally unaware that they're part of a program that started before they were born, that they are here to do what you're doing, to do what I'm doing, to do what a lot of the people you described so are doing, whether they're aware of it or not, because many of them are not. They're not supposed to. Maybe they will be later on. Maybe some of them are, uh, sooner than others. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah. I mean, mine kind of time released. The
Yes,
paranormal and all that, but the kind of wake up was that regression. I notice that happens with a lot of people, and I get clients that or people that just start talking to me, and they'll tell me a story or something that they don't know what to make of, and I'll hear it and I'll just think, oh, you know, you're one
they
of them.
don't.
And
Yeah,
I've even had people like, we're going in for a past life. Wait one sec.
sure.
Feeling the tickle. But like one girl, she kept saying an eyeball. And finally, and I've had a few people see this, and I'm like, okay, just look at it, you know. And then all of a sudden she goes, whoa. And she went through it, and she landed somewhere dry, pyramids. And then she's looking around and she said, is this alien shit? And she was on another planet. And, you know, I've had one lady telling me these stories, like she was from Japan, and a ghost that had been in her room floating by her bed, and she was really scared. She was 5, and she thought it had a kimono on, and she said it was tall. And then when we did the regression, she went to a past life where she was kind of an outcast male, and aliens were talking to her, and they were like gray types, and the rest of the town couldn't see them. And the aliens wanted her to talk to people or interface for them, and she was getting really you know, rejected because of it. And then after that life, we I asked her about this being, and she said, oh. And she thought it was a ghost because she said in Japan they depict them like this, and it was pale. And she described it. She said it has a face like a bug. And,
Huh.
you know, and I realized it was a mantis being. And I said, why is it there? And she said, they want to know. She felt like they wanted her to stop a nuclear test that had happened in Korea or somewhere, North Korea, when she was a kid. And she said, I'm just a kid. I can't do that. So I think a lot of people have been them, have interacted with them all along. And so there's that level that's just way vaster than our human consciousness can deal with. And then our body has fight or flight. It wants to live, it wants to get along with other people. And a lot of people that are like us, we're the weird kid. We're the one that people kind of are like, you know, reject, and we don't get it. And we're reading people and we don't know we're doing that. And
Yeah.
they don't like that we know stuff about them. And then you kind of grow into it. You grow into yourself and you realize, oh, I have abilities, or I, and And
How about that?
yeah, and a lot of people are really kind of programmed with religion to be terrified of it or to
Yes.
think the
It's
devil
in,
around every corner.
it's indoctrination, and it was done by people who knew
Yeah.
that people did have these abilities, and that takes away a lot of control from them, and they're trying to be in power.
Yeah,
So
and if you
they burn people at the stake for
oh, and I think I've had past lives like that,
it.
killer and stuff. But yeah, if somebody can get between you and whatever is happening, or they can convince you that, you will give them money or support to, you know, to get access is the idea. And it's really with cults. I mean, I think religion has really good sides to it of belonging and, knowledge and things. But
Community.
yeah, then there's that side that's, like, don't trust what's happened to you, or anything they can't understand or explain must be the devil. It's like really kind of fear based. And I remember as a kid, there was a family, our family, really good friends. The dad ran a department at JPL, of course. And
Sure.
I think there's, stuff there too. But this other family, our parents all lived in the same apartment complex, like when I was a baby and born in Pasadena. And we were up visiting them, and the daughter and I were about the same age, and she had this like 3 foot glowing, you plug it in, Virgin Mary, and she slept with, and across the room. And then she told me one night she just started growing in size, and then she came over to the bed, and I was so scared. And I remember later thinking, yeah, it probably wasn't your
Yeah.
Virgin Mary. or
You're,
but that
that's Jack Parsons territory.
yeah, it was her filter. Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. And it's funny you say that. That's my dad worked at Aerojet. So did
Oh, wow. So you know the whole story about Jack Parsons and it wasn't a cult. It was
yeah,
really just
Alice.
a bunch of like-minded people that our government decided they wanted to get in and trash, and they did a good job of it.
Yeah.
They weren't hurting anybody, but they were not normies.
No.
Jack Parsons was not a normie, and
No.
yet he was brilliant and kick-started our space program quite literally.
Yeah, and that's what my dad did. I mean, he
Wow.
was torpedoes. He worked for the Navy first. He was a civilian, and then Aerojet. And the hilarious thing, one of the meetings, there was a member that she's married to someone that's kind of public in the, you know, on shows and things, that was around the Tic Tac situation.
Right.
But same name. She grew up in Claremont part of the time. We went to the same grade school as me and my friend Wendy, and somewhere along the lines, I probably was in high school with her siblings. I mentioned, it came up about clearances and all that, and my dad worked at Aerojet, and she said my dad worked at Aerojet. And then two other members said, my dad worked at Aerojet. There are only about 10 of us there. So 4 out of 10, dad worked at Aerojet. Stan Friedman worked at Aerojet. The guys in the Cisco Grove incident worked at Aerojet. And, and then I've since found out, like my dad, he worked at Hughes Aircraft. He started off at Suma, which was a offshoot. Now I know it was CIA and black budget, and they were picking up a Russian submarine. I've since heard that the one guy, Kit Green, I've heard it kind of third hand, but he said, "Oh, those are the UFO people." And apparently, there's some thing, I'm still very curious about it picking up UFOs off the ocean bottom as well, because it was like a claw, and it would pull it up into the bottom of the Glomar Explorer. And so I don't know. My dad also has one of those weird deaths of 2.5 weeks from cancer, like he had felt ill, and then 2.5 to 3 weeks later he was dead. And I since heard a bunch of stories about that too.
Yeah, that's also very typical. I'm going to slip in here that because I've been thinking about this ever since you brought it up. But my step grandfather, who out of all the people in my family, I had an amazing connection with. He
Mm.
was a brilliant scientist. He invented the camera that photographed the splitting of the atom. He
Wow.
worked at Berkeley. He worked in Berkeley on the nuclear accelerator there, and he worked on the Manhattan Project. In fact, he was drafted out of high school to work on it. He was so brilliant. Don't
Wow.
you find that interesting? Here you are telling me about all these connections, and I have the same thing right here. And of course, my dad was an engineer.
Mm.
Uh,
Wow.
he died when I was 14. My grandfather died only in his late 40s from cancer.
One.
Uh, and my dad worked at Mare Island, and he was an engineer for nuclear submarines.
Wow. See, my dad also, he'd go out on nuclear submarines. He'd go to Virginia Beach. A lot of times we didn't know where he was going. I remember one time him, every once in a while something would come out, but he told me about being out in the ocean on this ship that would invert. Like it, and I looked it up. It's called a flip ship, but
Oh,
scientists would be on it, and then it would flip, and everything they'd have set up that would work vertically. And I guess a terrible storm came through, and they were pretty terrified, but I guess it made it through. But I think that's why he said something, because it really freaked him out. But
wow.
yeah, and he was an underwater acoustics specialist also, and he helped the listening, things. And yeah, and it's funny, I got some information when he died. Um, he passed a note to the nurse right before he died that said he wanted to resign from the Woodhouse program, and pointed like to give it to his wife. And this note, we had it floating around, we didn't know what it meant. And a friend kind of looked into it a bit, and it's funny, he got this through Chat GPT, and then all of a sudden the source was shut off. But it was something to do with pre-stealth technology. And up at McMinnville, I was
There's
talking.
that name again,
Yeah,
McMinnville. I need to know more about that.
I was talking to Lou Elizondo, after his talk. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and I just asked him about it. And when I said Glomar Explorer, he went, "Oh, K-129, which is the submarine that went down." So a lot of this, I think, is this legacy stuff. And then I mentioned this Woodhouse program, and he just kind of nodded. And he can't say anything.
No.
But then he kind of caught up with me, and he said, "You're not far off. Like, you're on the right track." And my uncle, he was Air Force, and then he became a manager for Boeing. And he told my sister when she was quizzing him about it, we were thinking about FOIA requesting, and he said, "No, don't do it. A lot of it's still very classified." So I am curious. I really would like to.
Yes, we're all curious, and I thought I was polluted with aerospace and nuclear sciences and stuff, but boy, you were definitely surrounded by it, and as you well know, um, and you've had lots of clients and lots of people you worked with, and you know that so many of them have this background too. Not all of them, not
Uh,
every single one, but a large number of them do.
ah, it's
It's fascinating
it really is.
what that connection is. Have you are you familiar with Susie Henson?
Yeah, yeah. I've
Okay.
actually met her, and she actually had some Men in Black kind of chase her down after one of the conferences she
Yes,
talked.
I know. Have
In.
you read her book?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, then you know about the program and that book. There's a lot of things I did not work with Yvonne on, and a lot of stuff I held back. I didn't really hold it back. I just thought that was just some crazy childhood imagination stuff. I'm not sure it really relates to it, so I didn't look into it. So I
Yeah.
start reading her book, and to make a long story short, her book uh, triggered me, and I started having memories just coming at me that were powerful. They were very emotional and
Wow.
brought me to tears, and I came out of shape. But it wasn't because I was afraid. It was more because I was sad, because my memory of my time I spent with the visitors as a child was so wonderful to me as a kid.
Yeah.
And I've never gotten over it. And there it was in her book, along with many other things. We have been talking and over Zoom. She's in New Zealand, and we're going to do. Uh, she's going to tell one of her stories about being on the craft and something that happened that was really amazing. But I was just curious. I don't want to go on about that, but I was just curious if you were aware of her.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't, but you have really done your research. There hasn't been anything I brought up you didn't know about, and in many cases more than I do.
Do you
So
know
my
what's
hat's off to you. It's important to know the
yeah.
history of this work. So many people I've interviewed, they don't know who Bud Hopkins is. Now, that's not to discredit them in any way, shape, or form, because you can't expect everybody to be so into this that they know all these things. A
Yeah.
lot of them have these experiences, and they've never even thought about UFOs before,
Yeah.
and that's understandable. But as someone who works in this field, it's very important, like yourself, that you know your history. I think it's wonderful, Kim.
What's really weird is before, I mean, I knew about Travis Walton. Actually, that black triangle I saw was a few months before he got taken. There were like more big things like that that I had heard of and I thought were interesting, but I just didn't feel connected to it. Was that regression that all of a sudden I went from, oh, that's interesting over there to like, oh, I, I'm one of these people.
Yeah, the light bulb came on.
Yeah, and I telling you, like at MUFON, I hung around with Melinda Leslie. She reminded me of my sister, and
Remember her well.
I got a big dose of that. I drug my husband to go night vision UFO watching, and we watch him go into a portal and out, and and he was kind of like, huh, he's skeptical, and he's actually been with me when I've seen some weird, like a black diamond shaped thing that was like 4 feet wide. Um, the one I saw off the deck right after the pandemic with my girlfriend and her husband, it was just sitting 2 streets down. 4th of July, we're looking for old fashioned airplanes to fly by. And my friend who has an extensive history of this and owl stuff, she said, do you see is that a UFO? And I look and it's just sitting there, like probably 50 feet up right between the eucalyptus trees over the street, a rectangular bottom, kind of a weird top. And I'm trying to be rational. I said, could it be a drone? I mean, I knew, but I just trying to be logical. And then her husband and daughter both went, no, that's too big. And we just stared at it. We all had our phones. Nobody took a picture. I'm sure there's more to it. My husband
Yeah,
was,
they've been seen.
yeah, he was screwing around with chairs. I mean, they would have been the best pictures you ever saw in your life of a UFO. And then we just went back downstairs. And then when we went back up later after dinner to look at the fireworks, we're all like, what in the earth? Like, why didn't we take pictures of it?
I know why. I think
I
you do
know.
too. Yeah. Now you do know Joe Stillwell.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's
Yeah.
I actually connected him with Tracy, but and he did some filming for her, and then it didn't get off the ground. But yeah, I actually talked him into coming to Cerro because
Right.
he could not understand. He sent me his packet of why these scientists weren't jumping on it. They're listening for radio waves, and he had this crazy thing happen in his room.
Yeah.
And he had such a hard time getting through it. And it's really funny. I watched a podcast. My friend kept telling me to watch it. And it was a man that hunted Bigfoot or they'd get casts and things. And he had this really weird experience where he heard pigs. He was off on his own, and then he saw eye shine, and he went over and looked, and he sat in his chair, and then he felt a hand come down on his shoulder. And he was like Joe. He would freeze up and have trouble talking about certain parts of it. Joe really, over time, he got much better, but this guy was just shaking, and the voice was in his head, and it was kind of like felt threatening to him. And he didn't think it was a Bigfoot. He thought it was a being or something.
Mhm.
And there's kind of this shadow side to it of, it's almost like, if you believe it, you'll see it. If you're looking for devils or creepy stuff, that's what you'll get. If you're looking for angels, that's what you'll get. It kind of responds to you a bit. And I
Yeah.
don't, some of that's probably, there's so many terms like guides, angels, whatever, but it's beings that are in the other dimension that are, sometimes I feel like they play with people if they're getting too locked in. But this guy was traumatized, and it did remind me of people when they first get to a meeting or something where something has just blown their circuits.
Right.
And that's the hardest part, is getting past that.
We did a 4-part series on Joe because his story was so long that when we filmed them, we broke it into several parts, and we only did the one with the big brick shaped ship and the very strange looking being. I still want to go back and get the other story where he's in the Volkswagen with his girlfriend. Uh,
Yeah.
that I think that was probably for me was the most amazing because when they're describing these things to me, I can see it. I don't know how I see it, but I
I
see it.
can too. I
It's
totally can.
it's really weird, but you see it, and that's why I use my visual effects
Yeah.
skills to bring that stuff to life. Um, before we close here, Kim, I wanted to give you the opportunity to share with the audience what you're doing currently and anything else you'd like to say to
Yeah.
them.
Well, one thing I was just going to toss in there, I kept thinking
Okay.
about Joe when we saw that UFO off our deck. He lives just right up the bend. He's not far at all. And so when I saw it, I was like, oh, there's Joe's thing. And I'd had another person that has a shop that had described something just like it. But yeah, I'm kind of one of these, kitchen sink people. I know it's all connected. I've
Yeah, it
heard
is.
just about everything. I mean, every paranormal deal, I've had exposure to. And I just feel like people find me if they're ready for, to look deeper or to shift something. And even with the past life regression, some of it's what you see, some of it, and you know this from working with Yvonne, is there's some kind of internal healing that happens or shifts to where you can kind of pull up and look at it a little more objectively, and the fear can diminish. You can operate in a more, I don't know, as above, so below way. You're not like,
Sure.
they're monsters, we're victims, or it's all a big soup. And so I now, if you just, look, if you want, look at my website. It's just like my
Right.
name, kimtrotman.com.
There will be a link up.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And people can make an appointment, or if they'd like to look at past lives or do a reading, or, I'm more than happy to. And I honestly, the one thing we always say, and Yvonne says this too, if people tell you they know everything, run. Nobody does. And if they're trying
That's
to
right.
charge you a ton of money, run.
Yeah.
There's no reason for that.
No, there's not. No,
Yeah.
there's not.
I mean, we can't exist for free, but still, it shouldn't be thousands of dollars. So
And you're located. Where again?
I'm in Huntington
In
Beach.
Huntington Beach. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, I highly recommend both of you, depending on your location.
Mhm.
And do you do also do you do things over the net the way Yvonne does, or is it strictly in person?
I've really been getting pushed to do that, and I
Yeah,
think I will. She's kind of told me how she does it, and
right.
I probably will, but I've resisted it so far. But,
Yeah,
because i- if somebody has a really frightening reaction, but the good thing about when you're in hypnosis, you can kind of lift out or shift the scene to something safer.
it's interesting you should say that because one of the things that I have learned about what's going on, you mentioned the praying mantises, and we know what the Greys are capable of. But there's been all this controversy about, well, they drug you, they do this, they do that to you, but it's none of those things. It's hypnosis. When
Yeah.
they have you, they put you in a hypnotic state where you're calm and you're not dangerous to them. But sometimes we pull out of it, and suddenly you open your eyes, and you're in a strange room in a strange location, and you see them, and they'll say, "Oh, no, 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 everything's okay. Just go back to sleep." And a
Yeah.
lot of times you'll see a mantis there who's like in charge. It is they are using hypnosis, and you said it. Sometimes you'll pull out of it. Your eyes will pop open. And it's like, where am I? And
Mhm. Yeah,
that
and
just made me think of that. So I thought I'd bring that up. I'm
I
sure you're
have
aware of it.
a quick thought on that too.
Yeah.
One thing I thought about when people are looking at like UFOs in the sky, a lot of times they're doing maneuvers or they're seeing lights or they're hearing a woo, woo, woo. It's all hypnotic. And even when, and I've had two where they get up in people's faces with their eyes, and I've had to find workarounds for that so they can get past that and see what happened. But they know how to affect our brains in a way that most humans don't. It's some highly developed, like you could feel just, I've seen people cry and they love them, or they feel like just beyond fear, or like feeling pain, and then you'll be okay, and then they're fine.
Exactly. Well, they're masters of consciousness.
Yeah.
And we should be too. And in fact, if we were, I don't think we'd be having the problems we're having on Earth right now.
Yeah, I
And I
agree.
think that's where this is all going is people like you and me and the rest of us, which there are literally thousands, millions all over the earth that are trying to affect change and raising vibration and consciousness so we stop having wars, we stop being angry, and we stop fighting.
Yeah, because stuff, you can have stuff, but you can't put it in your pockets when you go out. So,
No, and you're out more of the time than you're in.
yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, we have existed for uncountable years if we're to accept that, and I do that our consciousness was here first.
Yeah, and you get what you can handle, and that's what you'll perceive. And if you can't, you'll just blank out. And in human form, it is more limited, but that's okay. We have a reason we're here and we're on Earth and we're incarnating, and
Yeah.
you don't always know what it is, but you figure it out along the way.
Ultimately, it's beautiful and it's a wonderful experience, and so it's the experience of being in space and being on a craft that can go anywhere in the universe and seeing all the beauty out there. But it's all out there, and we're in there. We're part of it, so it's all okay.
I love it.
Um, yeah, there's no reason to be afraid of death because death is not final.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
think this is a good place to end this conversation. And it's been a wonderful conversation. And as always, with all my guests and my friends I have on this show, I could go on like this for 3, 4 hours easily. But I think the best thing to do is to keep in touch and have you come back from time to time if you're open to that,
Yeah,
because it was really terrific having you in the conversation.
that was great talking to you, and keep up the good work.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
All right. Bye.